All right. All right, let's go ahead and get all of the kinks out. I am I'm here to talk to you today about Azure and the database service or no, sorry, let me straighten all this out. All right, this is Data API Builder. Data API Builder community stand up. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Today is October the 2nd. And today we're going to focus on a couple of things. We're going to talk about the current release that we have right now. We'll be talking about some of the effort that we're going into as we move into the next semester of engineering. And we have the PM for static web apps to walk through some of the basic implementation around introducing how Data API Builder is so tightly integrated with static web apps and how it can make it such an easy experience for you to be able to start using and start making the most out of Data API Builder without the prerequisite of understanding necessarily anything about containers, how to host containers, orchestrating containers, or anything along those lines. And so I'm really excited about that. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can't believe I don't have that already set up and ready. Here we go. And this is just a quick walkthrough of kind of where we are right now. So this is the current repository. Just a reminder, Data API Builder is completely open source and free. It's available to you and supports SQL Server, Postgres, Cosmos DB, and MySQL on the back end. We also have support for SQL Data Warehouse now as well. The repository, you can get to it at, it's either Azure/Data API Builder, or you can go to aka.ms/dab, and that's how you can jump right to it. There's a couple of things I want to point out really quickly before we move on, and that is at the top of our README is our community section. This is an invitation to you if you want to be part of the discussion and the roadmap going forward as we're choosing different features for Data API Builder. That's available to you now. And so you can click here, sign up. It's a form that allows me to be able to contact you and invite you to some of the polls and some of the surveys that we have as we prioritize different features moving forward. Um, as a reminder, right now we're at release 1.2. Now we have bumped up just a little. This is 1.211. The reason for that is there were some security vulnerabilities in the previous version of the container we used. So we upgraded and did a quick little patch here to make sure that we had the latest and the greatest to make sure there are no vulnerabilities there as well. So no change to our code, just the container itself, but wanted to make sure it was honestly about as excellent as possible. Okay, another quick thing is if I go into the issues section, and you can kind of look behind the curtain here for just a moment, we have a handful of enhancements that start with a star, and those are all of the ones we're discussing right now, kind of offline, that have already been prioritized by our community, been prioritized by our team together as far as what's engineering wise possible and makes the most sense to go in a specific order. And so if you're interested to see that discussion, you can go and search for the ones with a star in it. You can see if I scroll down, there's a handful here. And all of those, and by the way, you could just add the star in the search here. And if I say star, just add it there. And then when I search for it, it filters to all of them. These are all the ones we hope to be able to get to in the next semester. We're calling that the name of this semester inside Azure is Selenium. Again, we go through the periodic table of elements, and that's how it got its name. And the last element was dilithium, which is even better because of Star Trek. And but nonetheless, you can see some of the things we are thinking about. Changes in the way we handle store procedures, changes in the way we present our health data. We're also implementing open telemetry and some other pieces along the way that you can see of what it is we have planned. So again, it's a great resource, even if you're not there to file an issue. This is also where we manage our issues as well. And so you'll be able to see those. You could filter as well as like a project to milestone, but the easiest way for now is that everything in Selenium that we're going to try and do is preceded with a star. All right, so one last thing, if you jump over to our docs, so these are our docs, and if you jump to our docs and you go to our quick start here, nope, sorry, not the quick start. If you go to our deploy, one of our deployment options is to deploy to Azure static web apps. And so this is one of the things, this is the primary thing we'll be talking about today when I bring in the team. And I just want you to know that this is available to you as well to be able to walk through and go and and publish your own application to static web apps. Yeah, the truth of the matter is, if you already have a database and you are building the CLI, or you are building the configuration file through the CLI of Data API Builder, which is very straightforward. Hopefully, you'll follow along the quick start for that. So that is the like local SQL would jump right into a database that you already have, for example. And then you want to deploy it. You can deploy it to static web apps and basically have a proof of concept ready for your manager to approve by a little after lunch. It's just insane how quick and effective this is. This is really a rapid development kind of thing. And remember, we don't have any sort of issue around, there's no license, there's no premium tier, there's nothing along those lines. You just get to introduce it. You do have to be able to host a container until you go over to static web apps, where it takes away that requirement. Static web apps is free. You have one, I don't remember, I'll have to ask. You have at least one static web app service that you can add to your subscription. And so it's a great place to start without any sort of upfront concern around that as well. Pointing directly to your database that's in Azure. And all of a sudden, you can have a data API as well as an Azure function, and all of the static resources that you want as well available to you. So you could host, for example, a Blazor application or a React application as well. So really cool stuff. Easy way to get started, especially if all you're thinking about is how do I get out from under this concern around how do I do a how do I handle a container. So beautiful there. All right, so Dheeraj is with me here. Dheeraj, I'm going to bring, and hiya Dheeraj. We just caught you just as you were coughing, so it's perfect. And hey, thanks for joining. I wanted to just go through some of the basics of Data API Builder before we got started, and but now I'm glad you're here with us. You're on Static Web Apps, the team. You kind of inherited Static Web Apps just a little under a year now, and you and I are working pretty hard to try and make sure that it's a first-class experience on the Data API Builder side.
Yep, that's exactly right. I'm super excited to talk to y'all about static web apps. Like Jerry mentioned, it is a managed experience for the Data API Builder. And within static web apps, we call it database connections. So we kind of manage that container hosting that Jerry mentioned, as well as some security and when you're connecting with your databases. There are a limited number of databases that we currently support. So to go down the list, I mean, it would be like Azure Cosmos DB, Azure SQL, Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database for Postgres. So yeah, that's kind of like the one limitation we have right now. But I mean, these are great databases to be using and migrating to. And
Dheeraj, let me make sure that I'm following you. So you're saying even though you theoretically can run Data API Builder in any cloud and on-prem, if you're going to use it for static web apps, you're going to point to Azure databases.
That's right. When you're using it as a database connection, like the managed version of the Data API Builder.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's still really cool. Jerry was talking about how quickly you can build a POC. Today, what I want to do is kind of go in and build a bare bone POC of a CRUD app that will basically connect with a Cosmos DB. And then I'll show some of the more advanced features that can be utilized, as well as maybe like an example of it in action. But yeah,
right,
I don't know.
Let me bring your screen up and get started, and you can kind of walk us through the process. Actually, Dheeraj, nobody's ever met you before. Tell us who you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Dheeraj. I am a product manager for Azure Static Web Apps. Yeah, I love to code. I live in Chicago, and I'm really excited to be here. Like Jerry mentioned, I did inherit Static Web Apps recently. I think I've been on the job for about 6 months now, but previously at Azure, I worked on the rest of the PaaS portfolio, like Azure Functions, Container Apps, and App Service. So definitely something I'm super excited to be talking to y'all about. Yeah, and there's a lot of new content coming out, a lot of new features coming out for Azure Static Web Apps in general. So we have our own stand-up that'll be coming out once a month, theoretically. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, about Azure Static Web Apps.
No, Dheeraj, I didn't even know you lived in Chicago until this very minute. I always thought you were in Seattle. That is so hilarious.
Yeah,
wow.
I'm in Chicago. I guess that's why when we're always scheduling, I'm like, why are we talking about Pacific time? But
Wow, that is hilarious. All right, let me not interrupt.
okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So static web apps, if you go to our quick starts, have a couple way of creating a basic app. Obviously, everyone can bring their own app, but we have this vanilla basic JavaScript app just for the sake of this demo. It'll be easy to show it like with this vanilla app. I'm going to call it demo 2, I guess, because that's
all right.
available.
I'm gonna be the voice on the wall here. So the first step is to build a repository in GitHub.
It's to build an app. So what I'm doing right now is I'm forking a vanilla JS app.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is just an example we have in static web apps to get you started quickly. But yes, it's to have this app set up. So I'm going to go ahead and PowerShell. Let me go ahead and bring it down into my local context here.
Especially JavaScript applications, they're perfect for static web apps because they don't need anything executing on the server.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, let me get So while that's working, the next step is once you have your app created, it's to create your Azure database if you don't already have it set up. I'm just going to go through this process real quick, but like I mentioned, I'm doing Azure Cosmos DB. This is our NoSQL database, and it's really very nice to use. So I'm going to call this database connections demo. Oh, this is
Mm-hmm. There are two Azure Cosmos DB options. One is NoSQL, one is Mongo. For Data API Builder, NoSQL is the only option we support today.
okay. Yeah, and then we have availability zones, locations. I'm gonna go ahead and pick a location that I know will hopefully provision quickly. And then there's a lot of different functionality you can do with Azure Cosmos DB. I don't know, Jerry, do you want to go into any of specific
No. I mean, if we can
configurations you could have with your Cosmos?
we can hop past them. It's okay. That's fine. Sure. I'll let you decide, man. You don't.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm just creating a basic Cosmos DB app. That's the next step. I'm going to go ahead and click create on that. All right. Let's get coding. So now that my app is created, I can go ahead and open it up here. Oh, you guys can't see my screen anymore. Let me stop. Okay.
All right, we can see it now.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm trying to find this cloned app that we created. Open it up in VS Code, which is my favorite code editor. And then, yeah, we have app, vanilla JavaScript app. Let's go ahead and run it locally. Right? Why not? So once we create it, we have to actually check if it works. So let's do. It should be.
Dheeraj, let me make sure I understand. So you cloned it, you pulled it down locally, you're running it to make sure it works. So far, just what a normal developer would be doing, right? This is just getting started with an application that's kind of not that special, right? It's just kind of ordinary, not exotic. Doesn't have any idea that it's going to be hosted in static web apps yet.
Yeah, that's fun. Nothing crazy. Let's see here.
Hit Control Plus a couple of times so your screen's a little bit bigger.
While I'm making that work, let me go ahead. Oh, okay, cool. My screen.
We can see your portal. Actually, Dheeraj, your okay, never mind. I was going to say your screen was starting to spin, but I just saw it. All right, we're at the quick start with you on the portal.
Okay, cool. I think I was frozen there for a good amount. But yeah, so here basically, let's go through the rest of the setup process for the Cosmos DB web app, right? So what we need to do here is we need to create a new container and a database. These steps right here, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Data Explorer. Sorry, I think my computer is just really slow. Awesome. So yes, we want to do next here, and finish. Okay. So we want to what we want to call we want to create a new database. We're going to give it the container ID of my test container. Looking at it quickly is going to be our key. I'm going to call it my based on how many uses you have. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that.
Dheeraj, can you hear me? Dheeraj, you still with us there? You can hear me all right?
Run that out. Fly is just a local development tool that'll allow us to run this code locally, and we can see what our web app would look like when deployed to static web apps. But for now, I'm just going to install the static. I'm going to install the CLI. So I have static web CLI.
Wait, Dheeraj, can you hear me all right?
Again,
can you hear me when I'm talking? Are you still there?
You can deploy, but you can also, without deploying, see how the data. I'm going to go to items, and I'm going to create my first item. Just some sample data to get us started, get the show rolling. Mm-hmm. Yes, Jerry. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of lag here. Let's see. I think we may just be in a little hiccup here. Let's see if we can get you let's see if we can get you figured out here. And and he fell off the piece. We do have a question here just for fun. Is Bing powered by Cosmos DB? Hey, this is the Data API Builder community stand-up. This is not the Cosmos DB community stand-up. But yes, that's funny you should ask. It is. There is a component of Bing that absolutely uses Cosmos DB. You didn't ask this, but so does OpenAI, and it's always been fascinating to me that some of the biggest AI solutions out there are using Cosmos DB on the back end, in part because it's geo dispersed and because it supports vector operations as well. So pretty cool there. Dheeraj, I think you dropped, but I'm glad you're back because your lag was pretty serious, and maybe this will reset everything for us.
Okay.
Yeah, you were like a full minute
I was
behind
freezing
when I
up a
asked
little
you a
bit.
question. All right, let's just try this again.
Okay. Cool.
All right, we can see your Data Explorer, and you selected
where I was.
Hey, this is the real world. Things happen. This is sometimes what happens here. All right, let's see if we could get. Dheeraj, is it when you are sharing your screen? I'm trying to find a pattern of what's going on here, but you're not sharing your screen right now, and we still see that you're frozen. I think this might just be bad luck. Listen, that's the way it goes. The truth of the matter is, if you try and do this over StreamYard, perhaps you won't have your proof of concept ready by after lunch. It'll be tomorrow's lunch, just because there's issues behind it. That's the big deal. The truth of the matter is, interacting with static web apps is probably one of the most straightforward things you'll do. But let me explain to you how it works while Dheeraj is kind of moving back for it. Let's see if I can. I don't know. I can't. I don't think so. And that's all right. It's 100% okay. And let me fix this. All right, if he comes back, that's okay. The way static web apps works is to add information to static web apps generally, and I can hear him, but I can't see him. It's all right. Dheeraj, you still there? I can hear you, but maybe you stopped
hear me
your
right
camera.
now?
Right now, I can hear you.
Yeah, I did. Let me see if this helps.
Okay. Keep talking to us so we know you're still there.
Okay, but basically works. So I have this example of it up. Camera off. Hopefully this shows up. Basically, I have the network trace up, and you can see here, this is a different example that I have. We have the following ability in database connections where you can programmatically do all of these without a backend using just database connections. So for example, if I want to list everything in my GraphQL, I'm going to get this 200, and you can see that I had one entry in my database called one Molly. How this works, it was the steps I was going through. Basically, once you set up that Cosmos DB, once you set up that vanilla JS app, you can link everything in the portal. Let me quickly show the code for what this looks like and how simple this is. And Jerry, feel free to cut me off if at any point this is not working. So once you've deployed to static web apps, again, multiple ways to deploy to static web apps. You can use the static web app CLI, which I was going through. You can use the portal, which connects directly to your GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps pipelines. And it's super streamlined. You just basically tell static web apps where you're.
Dheeraj, we can hear you, and your screen looks great, but you got to hit Control plus a whole bunch because it's everything's quite small.
Okay. Cool. Let's do it there.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah. But yeah, through the portal, you can just basically tell static web apps which repository you want to deploy, and it generates the GitHub Actions file. That's my favorite way to do it. But yeah, so essentially, once you have the SWA CLI set up, you will run something called SWA init web apps configurations files. Once you have that set up, there is another command that you can find in our quick start that will initialize the database connections itself. I'm scrolling up right now to see if I can find it. But essentially, it will create these two files for you, the database config file and the database schema file. Because of the way Cosmos DB is set up, the system can't pull the schema directly from the Cosmos DB. So you will have to define your database. So in this particular example, as you saw when I created the sample data, we have the ID and the name of the person. And so that's my schema. And then within my database config file, I have my environment. I pull from my .env file, my database connection string, which can be found in Cosmos DB. And I define that my schema is there. All of this is generated for you. Basically, if you just input your connection string, once you hit that SWA init, SWA database init.
That's right.
File command. It's SWA db init is the command and then you would get both of these files. This one would be mostly filled in. Finally, the part that you have to add yourself besides the connection string is the entity. So we created that person entity in my test person container. And here you're able to define who has permissions to do the CRUD operations that we were looking at through this config file. So for example, right now you can do all actions and anyone can do it. But we have a certain amount of authenticated roles that you can go and define right here. And users that have logged in, or if you're using the static web apps authentication, based on what their role is, they might not be able to do certain things. And that's where you would define all of that. Now,
now, Dheeraj, we have
the code itself.
We have a quick question here.
In JavaScript, you could add something like.
Dheeraj, we have a quick question. Hang on just a second. Jim on the line here is asking if we can choose which version of DAB is used. I want to answer generally, and then I want you to answer for static web apps because the answer is different. So this is kind of a two-part question, I could tell. So let me just answer both of them real quick. Can you choose the version of DAB that's used? So DAB is a container that you'll pull down and run in your environment, and you can add the tag to return every version that you want. So if you want to take the latest every time, you can use the latest tag and always get the latest. But if you want to stick to 1.2, for example, and not upgrade to 1.3 for whatever reason, then go ahead and issue that or indicate that in the tag itself, and you'll always get the version that you want pulled down, and you'll never upgrade. And then you can kind of stage your own upgrading cadence, whichever makes sense for your app or for your company. So can you choose the version? You absolutely can. The answer is going to be different when we get to static web apps, though. Tell me about that, Dheeraj. I'll answer for you because no, I'll answer for you. And there's two quick tidbits to this. Static web apps always has our latest version, so it's sometimes about 2 weeks behind when we have our release. And so when you go to the root of a data API builder endpoint, so you go to, for example, in static web apps, you go to data-API, you'll get a healthy indicator and the version number, so you know what it is. You can't control the version number in static web apps. You're just always on the latest and about 2 weeks behind when we release it. Now, when you are running the static web apps CLI locally, it always follows the same piece. However, it doesn't always have to follow the same 2-week delay for it to be deployed out to the garden of containers. When you're running it in your local CLI, it will be updated as soon as we have that release. So as you're starting interacting with it, you'll be able to make that plan that's going to happen in the next 2-week window, whatever that is. So when you're running on your own in Azure Container Apps, Azure Container Instances, Kubernetes in Azure, local on-prem Kubernetes inside Amazon Web Services, wherever it is you're running Data API Builder, you get to indicate what the running in static web apps, you get it. You get always the latest within a week or two of when the latest is done. Now, it asks, can the compute be scaled? I'm just going to answer this for you, Dheeraj, from the perspective of static web apps. Jim, if you didn't mean static web apps, you can ask again. But in static web apps, the scaling is handled only there. Like you have no knobs, no buttons to push. You get only a single container, and that's your scaling solution. So if what you have is a multiple, you want to have multiple containers and shards, or you want to have an extremely large container, or you want to have a container that's not ephemeral and has a long life cycle, that's totally up to you, and you'll have to move that off of static web apps to have that sort of granular control. However, if what you want to do instead is just break things up so that they're smaller APIs, you can easily make it so that you have multiple static web apps that work against the same database, but only exposing certain entities. So you do have some creativity here to be able to do whatever it is you want inside static web apps, but not all the bells and whistles that you would have if you were hosting it yourself. Hopefully that answers the question, Dheeraj. That sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
All right, cool. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah. So within my screen, yeah. So within this basic app, the one we were looking at before just had this HTML with the hello world part. We've added some JavaScript down here with this script file. All of this can be found on our quick starts under static web apps. So if you ever want to reference this again, all of it's there. But essentially, in order to get this functionality, you use this endpoint called data-API that we offer. This endpoint will allow you to pass in the information needed to list, get, and create update amongst the other CRUD opportunities. So this is what it looks like. For example, here I have my query to get to list everything that's in my database. I'm making that request to the data-API endpoint, and then I await the response. And then in this particular example, I'm just putting the results in my console, but obviously that where those results go is up to you. And with static web apps, you can put it out to the end customer anywhere you want. Similarly, you have the get functionality update. So this is what the update query would look like. You would have this mutation update, and then you would make those changes. And again, all of these requests, I think the key thing to note with database connections and data API is it's this simple. You just basically have your dash data dash API backslash data slash dash API, and you make a post or a get request to that endpoint, and your Cosmos DB will be actively updated. Is there anything else here, Jerry, that you want to mention?
Nope, this is a basic client. You're using. I think it's worth at least saying that data API builder that you're using the GraphQL endpoint, but there's also a REST endpoint. Data API builder is just configured either using both or one or the other. So it's not a choice between GraphQL and REST. You can use them both at the same time. You've chosen to use Graph. Developers love Graph, so keep going. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much the setup. So just to go over the steps, you would create a static web app. You would create a Cosmos DB. You can do that a plethora of ways. I've done both using the portal. Then using the SWA CLI, I'm initializing my database connections, which would be SWA DB init, which will create this folder and these two files. And then within these two files, I update the content to fit my schema of my database of what I want to see. And I am setting up my permissions and my entities, as well as my connection string. Finally, within my code itself, I am looking through and creating the following post requests using the queries, depending on what type of functionality I want. And those are all of these code snippets are going to be on the static web apps, database connections, Cosmos DB, quick start. So if you ever want to go back and reference what a post request to delete something from a Cosmos DB using database connections, you can find it there. But yeah, once all of that is complete, you can just go ahead and use it live. This is a live deployment on Thankful Stone.
Hey, Dheeraj.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Do me a quick favor and pull up your schema one more time. The schema that you created for Cosmos, so that you could pull back the data that you wanted. I just want to make a quick point about this. One is, for now, it might feel a little strange because here you are in a schemaless database creating a schema. But remember that you're returning data in a structured way now. And so you want it to have some sort of structure. This also allows you to be able to point to things and rename them so you can map fields. It also means that you could start projecting your data and not return all of the document at the same time as well. So there's a lot of value in this. But if you go to our repository now and you start thumbing through our pull requests, you'll see that we're already starting to work right now, and we're going to have a release of it soon, I hope, of a feature that allows you to auto-generate the schema against a document inside Cosmos by inferring the data types and structure for you. What's nice about that is you would see something like what Dheeraj is currently showing, only it would be much bigger because it would show your entire document, and then all you would need to do is prune it back to being exactly the type of doc that you want to be able to return. That should be able to reduce a lot of the effort to build a schema on top of your documents in Cosmos. So again, this feature is really just meant to help reduce the friction, like everything inside Data API Builder. Just reduce the friction of adoption and getting started and making everything easy for you. So I know that you probably created this by hand, Dheeraj, and I just wanted to give you a little hope for the future that one of the things we're going to do is try and make this so that it can be inferred automatically. You'll still need a schema file because you still want to have the control. Just building that schema file will be an automatic piece that we'll add as a feature of our CLI. Cool, huh?
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have to create this by hand.
Right, exactly. That's why it's so simple.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. I interrupted right when you were about to show the working final piece. So sorry about that. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was the working final piece. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Does that do it on the network trace itself? But yeah, you can see here, like it's making these GraphQL calls. We're getting the 200. So all of that is working fine. When I'm retrieving from my database, I get the following example because I only asked for the ID one in my get request. If I list all of them, I'm going to get both Molly and Pedro, who I created Pedro using the create button. But yeah, that's how you can check that this is all working. It's going to be making these requests. In this particular bare bones example, I'm just putting it out in my network console. But yeah, this is something that you could use in your static web app.
Yeah, it's a great idea, actually, putting it out on the console like that, just so you can see it real easy without building the UI. That's smart. We can learn little tidbits like that all day long. That's pretty great. A couple of things that are at least worth kind of shouting out. So, what is with static web apps? Static web apps, as Dheeraj told us at the beginning, but I want to make sure everybody understands. You have a GitHub repository or you have a DevOps repository inside Azure, and you connect them. So the right order of things usually is to make it so that you you first have your repository before you create your static web app. That way, as you're provisioning your static web app, you point to wherever that is so that it can inject the workflow step that automatically, like in GitHub, automatically in an action will take whatever it is you commit into main and push that up in, or whatever branch you choose, and we'll push that automatically up into static web apps. So a little bit of a trick with static web apps is that you don't upload files. You only do it through the repository. And so that's an important first step. If you do it the other way and you create your static web app, then you create your repository, the CLI supports that connection for you, but it's a lot easier if you do it inside the portal, doing it in the other direction for sure. And then creating the database connection inside the portal, it's worth at least pointing out that you can only have one. That's a pretty common question, is how many can we have? You can only have one. You can use password, username and password for regular SA sort of password that you would go into your SQL Server. If you're using any sort of managed instance, that's supported as well, and you can just impact that by changing your connection. So if you create the connection and change your authentication type, you can just, they call it unlinking, but you can basically just delete it and recreate it inside the portal and use whatever auth mechanism that you want to be able to use. Boy, my tongue is really tied today. Jim, one of the things you asked, and Dheeraj, do you mind if I just show my screen here for a quick second?
Yeah, go ahead, take over.
Yeah, there's so many neat things that Static Web App shows. I want to make sure that we cover those, but I want to talk just for a second about the scalable architecture of DAB outside of Static Web Apps. So this is what it might look like if you have Static Web Apps running, right? You have a client and you have a database. Static Web Apps is right in the middle hosting the data API builder for you. It can also host, by the way, Azure Functions so that you can do custom operations as well. And that's really a valuable piece. It says here it's completely free, but actually, Dheeraj, talk to me about, I can't remember, is it just one or can I have two free instances of static web apps in my subscription?
So I believe there's no limit on the number of apps you can have. There is a performance limit to having the free app. So like the size of your app can't go above 250 MB. So that's kind of the restriction. Our standard tier has a higher limit on those restrictions and will allow you to have other linked backends and etc. And that's $9 a month, and you can have a ton. You can have as many as you want in one subscription, as far as I know.
From a data API builder perspective, the container stays the same, though, right? It's that we're not scaling the data API builder container. We're just scaling the capabilities inside the static web app.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. I misspoke. There is a subscription limit. We can have 10 apps for free in one subscription. We can have 100 apps on the standard plan per subscription.
Okay. All right. Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then last, I just want to point out EasyAuth. So EasyAuth is a mechanism built that is, it's not unique to static web apps, but static web apps has adopted it, and it makes it so that it is extremely straightforward for you to be able to interact with all kinds of OAuth providers out there, but come back into a unified set of claims and a JSON structure. And so we support that natively inside Data API Builder as well. So if you're using static web apps and you want to use EasyAuth to make authentication easy, which makes sense, then we support that as well. So it's a great way to get started. I did want to just point out a couple of little things that around the scalability of Data API Builder. So let me just jump to a quick slide here. One of the things that Data API Builder supports is, of course, you can have API manager. That's up to you. This can be an open source API manager that you have integrated into your application, or it could be a service that you're using. Whatever it is you want, an API manager can make any API solution much more elegant and much more powerful. In fact, often people will ask, is there some sort of XYZ feature inside Data API Builder? And the answer is no, because that feature belongs in an API manager. And so I just want to point this out that often developers will adopt an API manager into their solution later maybe because they don't realize just how valuable it is. So I just want to point that out, that it's worth your time to investigate that and add it to your solution if you're really serious about it. One example might be API keys. You want to be able to implement API keys. Does Data API Builder support API keys? Not like that. No. API keys are managed and completely handled by an API manager, where it should be, right? So we really are just operating against your database and giving you REST and graph endpoints and CRUD operations so that you can basically erase a big chunk of your code. Dropping it into static web apps, beautiful. That's what we want to do so that we can make it really easy to deploy. And one thing that I forgot to mention, and I think Dheeraj, you forgot to mention too, because we're working so hard to get it kind of past this, but in the static web apps world today, this is in preview. This is not GA today. That doesn't really matter for a lot of use cases, to be honest. But sometimes you might work in a company where they're like, we will not use anything that's in preview. So Dheeraj and I are working to make sure that we are pushing this to get to GA. But today it's still in preview. And so you'll see that when you go into the portal and you start adding a database connection, it says database connections and then preview to remind you of that. And so if you're wondering when that's going to be out of preview and when it's going to be GA, I don't have a date for you, but I can tell you that it is one of the top things on both of our minds to be able to get it out of. So you can have a kind of a microservices architecture with Data API Builder, where it's side by side. You could say every time there's an instance of Data API Builder, you can think of static web apps. That works just as fine. Another one that you might do instead of that is if you have sharded all of the operations so that you have multiple, or so you have a fraction of each of your entities showing up in each of your API endpoints. That might be important because if you're using static web apps, they'll all be identical as the way they're provisioned. If you're using your own host, then each of those might be scaled differently depending on who the audience is. That's completely up to you, but it gives you that sort of flexibility to do just that. So it's really, really cool. Another option, by the way, and this is going to require that you host it yourself. This isn't static web apps, but it does give you the option to point data API builder to multiple databases at the exact same time. So today, at least, we have this where we limit you to just one connection inside of static web apps. That's partly because we also limit you to a predefined size of your container as well, right? So that's really important. Another thing you can do that is similar to this is you can point to multiple data sources at the same time, but they don't have to both be in cloud. They don't have to both be on-prem. They can be a hybrid mix of both of them, making your API bring back a single payload from two different locations, right? That's pretty amazing. Now, remember, multiple sources is not supported in static web apps today, and static web apps points to only databases in Azure today. So the four Azure databases of SQL, Cosmos, MySQL, and Postgres, right? So that's really great. So I just wanted to, one of the questions was kind of around how does it scale? It scales in lots of different ways, but it also supports a lot of different kind of topologies as well. So that's the important part. All right, so Dheeraj, you still have your camera on, so I can't have you join unless you want to. Thanks for joining us today. Really, honestly, static web apps has been a dream come true for Data API Builder because it makes it so easy to just throw one up there. You don't have to think about how I provision a VNet or anything along those lines. You just drop a single file basically into a GitHub repository, and the next thing you know, you're connected to your database with like a full suite of REST or GraphQL endpoints. And so it's been great working with you. I'm looking forward to as we start pushing our way out of this preview for sure.
Sorry, my computer and network was lagging so bad. It really is not like I could, we definitely would have built the app that I showed at the end within the 40 minutes that we had. But yeah, I guess we just had a little bit of technical difficulties.
Are you connected over a Verizon endpoint?
I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe.
Yeah, let's play Verizon. That'd be great.
I'm not
All
sure.
right.
But yeah.
So today is the first Wednesday of the month. This is the second, the October 2nd. And so the next first Wednesday of the month is going to be October, November. Golly, November already, Dheeraj. November the 6th, it'll be the first one. That'll be our community stand-up. We should have another version of Data API Builder around that time as well. So hopefully I'll be able to announce that and walk you through the changes that are there as well. Dheeraj, thanks for taking the time and being on this. We love static web apps, obviously, and it's one of my primary demos that I give as well. And for everybody else out there, please join our community. Go to akms/dab and definitely give yourself an opportunity to just be part of the decision-making process moving forward. We're now starting in October, that's right now, opening up the next semester of engineering work here inside Microsoft. Microsoft's investing deeply into Data API Builder because we want to make it as frictionless as possible to adopt all of these databases inside and outside of Azure. And so being part of the community allows you to tell us what's going on. But probably the best thing you can do right now, because we've started setting our short-term agenda already, our short-term priorities, is to go in and vote on those issues that you see inside the repository with a star on those. We love it when you comment it. We love it when you vote on those. It really helps kind of solidify the direction that we go. And so we're thinking a lot about all of these things right now, so it's the best time to do it. Thanks again, Dheeraj, and obviously, I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks all.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.